So Jen Psaki was recently questioned about opening up schools in Southern California, and I have a lot to say about this response and about this topic in general. My opinion seems to be very different than the typical opinions that Americans seem to hold. Let's watch the video first, then we'll talk about it.
I'd like to find out what the White House thinks about what's happening in San Diego, where some public school teachers are providing in-person instruction at the San Diego Convention Center to migrant children before their own public school students. And these kids, of course, about 130,000 of them have been at home doing online learning for about a year now. So what does the White House think about that?
Well, I know you guys have done a fair amount of reporting on this, so maybe you'll have more details. As I understand it, San Diego public schools are opening in early April.
April 12th to hybrid learning.
Okay. And students will be back in the classroom. And as I understand it, this is related part-time. And certainly, you know, our objective from the White House, opening up 5 days a week, majority of schools across the country. And they're on spring break right now. And this is related to volunteering or being paid. I'm not even sure. You'd have to ask the local school district during spring break for these migrant kids.
Yes, so the San Diego County Supervisor, Jim Desmond, he says, you know, I think it's great that there's in-person learning for unaccompanied minors from Central America, but I wish every child in San Diego County was allowed the same opportunity for in-person teaching. So I guess the question is, you know, does the White House think that this sends the right message to these 130,000 kids in San Diego and their parents who've been stuck at home for the last year?
Well, I'm just saying that context is important, and these kids are going back to school for hybrid learning. We, of course, want that to be 5 days a week, and we're confident we'll get there early next month. And I believe they're also on spring break right now. So these teachers would be, I'm not sure if it's volunteer or paid. You'd have to ask the local school district while the kids are on spring break.
Okay, so there's a lot to say about this. So number one, I want to give you my position on this whole issue about people going to school in general right now during COVID-19. So in my view, education can be done online. And here's the thing. I'm an educator. I've shown this 4 times now, but this is my name, math instructor. I teach math on YouTube. It's my second YouTube channel. The future of education is going to be online. Your kids are eventually going to be stay-at-home kids who do education online. And then eventually, daycares will be the thing that you send your kid to, right? Because education is like the whole concept of a physical teacher. That's a very archaic idea. And it's been proven time and time again that there are a lot of ways of introducing concepts with technology that are effective. And so anyone who disagrees with that, they're just not catching up with today, right? So today, technology is really effective. And we can invest in technology and education in technology that uses technology. We can invest in that instead. So we pay so much money for teachers. We really don't need to, though. We really don't need all of these teachers. We can just have a daycare instead. Because, I mean, honestly, that's all a school is. It's a daycare, and then every once in a while, you are exposed to good, meaningful concepts. If you want proof of that, read the book Teaching Gap. There are plenty of scientific arguments that can be made to suggest that American education is worthless. You learn nothing. Your math classes are stupid. Your history classes are incorrect. Your English classes are ineffective. So that's American education. The American education system is absolutely abysmal. It sucks. It's terrible. And the reason it's terrible is because the American education system is isolationist in general. The whole Teaching Gap talks about how in Japan, in Germany, you have schools where the teachers would observe other teachers. Like they would watch other teachers teach. That's what teachers did. That was part of their job. So if you work as a teacher in Japan, you have to attend classes. You have to go to school. And you have to go to the school that you're going to, or maybe a nearby school or something, and you watch their teachers, you criticize them, you somehow find ways of improving the lecture. You all get together. It's a very, very socialist environment in Japan and Germany, at least with their education system. We're nowhere near that right now. And so in the US, a school is just a daycare. And so if in the long run, the education system is just going to be going online, we really need to stop this whole nonsense of like saying we need to send our kids to school. No, we need to figure out how to put school online effectively by working together, get the teachers, all of them together, to create a standard system with the input of every fucking teacher that is hired. We can get them to create a single education system, a socialist idea, right? And then with that, you can improve constantly, get together, democratically improve. Hey, look at this lecture. We can instead talk this concept in this way. You know, that's the whole point of education. You see, in the teaching gap and in many of the research papers that I've read in math education, I learned that there is a giant gap between researchers and practitioners. And so because of that gap, you have massive education problems in the US. And so the US education, my whole conclusion here is the US education system is garbage. It's garbage. And so because of that, we might as well just get rid of it. Like, use those schools for like houses or something. I don't know. Find another use for these giant buildings everywhere, right? Have the kids just go to a daycare or something every once in, for a couple hours a day. And then after that, like, let them hang out with their parents, or I don't know, maybe do childcare for 8 hours a day or 10 hours or 12 hours. Who knows? Do that. Just do the thing that you're actually really wanting to do. The parents don't want to send their kids to school because their kids aren't going to learn anything there. And your parents know that. The parents know that. And so because of that, we get this. Now, that said, where am I on? Now that I'll get off that soapbox and let's talk about this specific issue real quick. Right now, immigrants are getting teachers. They're getting education, in-person teachers, San Diego teachers specifically, and schools are still closed across the country. And so the argument is, why do immigrants get the care first and not the Americans? I think that's a great question. And unfortunately, Jen Psaki didn't answer it. That is actually a great question. Now, I think we should be giving immigrants education. Don't let that, the implication goes one direction, not the other. Don't let that make you think that I don't want immigrants to have education. I think Americans should have education first and then immigrants. I think that both should have education. I just want to be clear. But I think that education should be given through a different medium other than the American education system. We can use those buildings for something else, to be honest. And teachers, by the way, if you're out there and you think that this is, they're going to take my job away. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about you working with teachers, not you working with kids. You end up working with teachers instead. Can let the parents and the people who need to like settle the kids down do their job. And you should do your job. Teach. Focus on teaching. Learn how to improve your teaching. Teach in different ways. Try new things. Teach. That's what teachers should be doing. Not being in front of kids where these kids are, 40 of them are all rowdy and they're all doing crazy stuff and you have to figure out their needs and one of them's hungry, that's not what you train a teacher. That's not what you should train a teacher for. You should train a teacher to be as effective as possible at teaching. That's what you should teach a teacher to do. In both ways, like I disagree with the motive here. I disagree with the concept of putting kids back into schools because schools aren't really the thing that you want to send your kids to in the first place, and you're just not willing to admit that. Maybe because of the other parents nearby or something. But anyways, here's the other thing I want to mention. We shouldn't be having any schools open right now. That spreads COVID. Not a single reporter has mentioned that thus far. Like, everyone just kind of pretends like kids don't spread COVID. Kids spread COVID. Now, the whole concept of let's get vaccination cards and let's let them, go into school if they get vaccinated, that I would be willing to consider. That's a scientific argument that makes sense, but that's not the conversation here. The conversation that the governors are currently having is, are we just going to open up the schools? That's the conversation. Yes or no? Well, looks like the population wants yes, so I guess we're just going to have to pick yes. But then the whole thing you did about closing down the governments, locking down everything, that whole thing was pointless. Do you understand why that whole locking down thing would be pointless if you just open up the schools? Because if you open up the schools, the message you're sending is, I'm okay with people spreading COVID. Again, this is assuming you do this before the whole vaccine card thing happens, which I hope they do it that way. But if they don't, then... And I mean, there are states that have already opened up the schools. And if you live in a state where they have the schools open, you should really ask yourself, why are they willing to open up the schools but lock me down? Why is it that kids don't spread COVID, but I do? Why is that? You should be asking yourself that.